on today's StoryBeat.
Run your own race, follow your own path. Don't worry about what other people are doing. And especially now, these kids they're doing that, and don't get worried about, oh, what's this guy doing or what are these people doing? It's like, keep your vision in your heart, what you want to do. Don't try to be what you think somebody else wants you to be.
This is StoryBeat with Steve Cuden, a podcast for the creative mind. StoryBeat explores how masters of creativity develop and produce brilliant works that people everywhere love and admire. So join us as we discover how talented creators find success in the worlds of imagination and entertainment. Here now is your host, Steve Cuden.
Thanks for joining us on StoryBeat. We're coming to you from the Steel City, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My guest today, Ed Driscoll, is joining me for the second time on StoryBeat. Ed's an Emmy Award-winning comedian, writer, and producer who's worked with some of the biggest stars in the entertainment industry, including Billy Crystal, Joan Rivers, Michael Buble, and Dennis Miller, to name just a few. Ed's produced material for variety shows, sitcoms, movies, and live theater, and he's been a stand-up comedian for over 25 years. Ed has authored 5 critically acclaimed books: Spilled Gravy, Looking to Click, Laugh, Dammit, Unmoved Chess Pieces, and Cracking Up. I recently read Cracking Up and can tell you it's a laugh-out-loud compendium of stories from Ed's highly memorable showbiz career. If you like hilarious, real-life Hollywood stories, I highly recommend Cracking Up to you. So for all those reasons and many more, I'm truly delighted to chat once again with the comedian and comedy writer, Ed Driscoll. Ed, welcome back to StoryBeat.
Thank you, Steve. It's only been 3 years since I was on the show, so I was wondering if you were going to have me back. Maybe
And here we are.
Yeah, so good deal. Nice to see you. And congrats on the success of StoryBeat. As you know, listen to it too. Actually, it's really well done.
Thank you.
Now sadly we're putting an end to it with my appearance here tonight. So.
We're likely to stop recording the show totally after we're done with you. No.
Why wait till the end? Do it right now.
All right. So look, I know that you are still out there cracking people up in doing stand-up. What in the world keeps you going back to face audiences?
Boy, don't I ask myself that like every time, right? But, it's been nice now that I'm doing, you were nice not to mention that book, Cracking Up. And that's the one-man show I've been doing and developing over the last 2-3 years. So it's not stand-up per se. You know what I mean? It's not like set up, punch. It's those stories that, like about 3 years ago, or actually during the pandemic, I was just recalling some of the things. You finally have a little chance to rest because all of a sudden there's no work coming in and you're sitting there, and I'm kind of thinking about, you can never rest when you're in Hollywood because like you go to this project, to that project, to this project, to that project because you just got to it, right? It's what we do.
Yes.
But then when you have a forced downtime kind of, and I thought you start thinking about some of these experiences and stuff I'd had, and as the years like fly by, and I was like, boy, for like 25 plus years, and like, oh yeah, remember this story, remember that story. So I just started jotting them down, thinking, I don't know, it's going to be a book or something at some point. And I started putting them down, and I was like, oh my God. And then remember that one, it would lead to another. So I was writing all these stories down.
So you started doing this around the pandemic then?
Yeah, I want to say around, yep. That was when I first, because I was like, oh, and then I was like, my memory's increasingly going, which comes in handy sometimes if you don't want to think about the show the night before. But I thought like, I just want to jot this down. But then I kind of got excited. I was like, oh, it's like a book, or is this a show? And it's like, oh, this might be both. And then so I just kind of kept doing that. And so really long answer to what you were asking about, but facing audiences. But this has been really fun because it was such a different thing for me to, I'm not just doing stand-up comedy. Here's my jokes, good night, which nothing wrong with it. And I still enjoy that. But before I did it too, so, with the pandemic and stuff, I didn't step on stage for about 1.5 years, which is probably the longest time off of a stage I'd had since I was about 20.
Did you feel rusty when you went back?
Well, I wasn't, so I wasn't sure. So I'm prepping this show. So now I'm writing these stories down, and I'm going to just tell these stories. And then I thought, I got to remind myself that this is going to be different, and don't be afraid of the silence because I thought, I'll be telling these stories, and there's plenty of humor in all the stories, but it's not like set up, punch.
Exactly.
And as a stand-up comic, you can get a little nervous going like, I haven't had a laugh in 30 seconds. I got to get this. So I kept reminding myself going like, look, just be relaxed with it. You don't know what they're going to like and what they're not. And in my mind, I really didn't. I was like, I've told these stories to my friends and to people here and there, but I've never really told them on stage. And I really had no idea how they were going to react.
It's more autobiographical, even though I assume your act all along has been somewhat from your life, from your actual experiences. You're not making up, fiction. But nevertheless, this book, if this is the reflection in your act as well, it's more autobiographical than it is, as you say, set up, punch, set up, punch.
Right. Because I'm like, here's the story, and here's what happened, and you have these setups, and again, I wasn't sure if anything was going to work, but at this stage, I was like, my batting average is pretty good in my mind. I'm like, well, I think these are really good stories, but you just never know what people are going to do. But I was just anxious to jump on stage again after all that time, and I wondered, like, am I going to feel rusty or whatever else? And boy, I didn't for 1 second,
Wow.
which kind of blew my mind. But I've always been the reason I knew that I may not have any trouble with this is that I've been a guy like if I work to do too many shows like in a row, I can get robotic. And my agent used to always say to me, he's like, you're sounding bored with this. I'm like, well, I am, but I get your point. And so and I do good with little times off, like a couple weeks. I'm talking not like a year and a half. But I thought that like, I think this is going to be real natural. And it's just stories and reminding myself, Ed, this is you talking to your friend telling these stories. So I went out there and, went really well. I felt terrific. Like I was a little shocked that I didn't have one bit of nerve, but you're coming through the pandemic and stuff like, what else am I supposed to be afraid of here? This is the only world that I feel like I can control sometimes.
Well, that's just another way to die is on stage, right?
Right. Masked up people. That'll be good. How about some muffled laughs? And some people were wearing masks. And I didn't, but I thought like, well, I get one of those big shields in front of me or something in case they're throwing stuff. I used to do that before the pandemic.
You should actually do the show over camera with a video screen, and then you don't have to worry about that at all.
Well, my God, right? Wasn't that coming up a lot? And then some people do little things, but I'm sorry, it's not the same. And
what kind of exchange of energy do you get from an audience? Is it very helpful to you when you're in front of people? Do you get that energy back from them?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely is. And like I say, now at this stage, I have a pretty good idea going, this is probably going to work good. Who knows with this? And my batting average is pretty high in my head to what actually happens. But ultimately, they got to kind of tell me. And especially with these stories, and just like with jokes, sometimes you write something, you go like, this is great. And then like, oh, I don't know about this one. And you'll get hardly anything on the one you loved and then a big laugh on the other. And you go like, oh, like not often does that happen, but once in a while you get surprised. And this happened with the stories too. I'd like tell this story and it's like, I don't think they dug that one, but you start 80% of it hit or whatever, which I was pretty happy with. And then this is funny. The guy that was producing the show, Frank merged it for me. So he came the first night we did the show, we get out and he goes, I got to tell you, when you told me you weren't trying any of this material anywhere else and had never done it, I thought, oh, this is a bad thing going to happen.
Yeah.
I was like, well, I'm glad. And I said, I'm glad you didn't say anything to me beforehand. I said, I don't think it was arrogance or stupidity or whatever, but I just felt like I know how to tell stories. These are funny stories. I'm going to go tell some stories. But I said to him, like, well, thank you for holding that in. Because he was like, boy, yeah, because that was great. Because he had said to me once in a while, like, you want to pop up and try something? But at that point, I was like, no.
So, if you told your 10-year-old self that you'd be writing and performing comedy for this length of time in your life, would you have believed it? Or what would your 10-year-old self have said to you? Forget it. You're crazy.
Wait, so like 15 was old at 10, right? So
Yes.
I think that's the thing I'd have the most trouble with. I might have mentioned it on the last time we were on, but I don't know, really young. I was probably 10 or when I just seemed to have this weird knack for cracking up kids and adults.
Mm-hmm.
And I had it in my mind from about the time I was that like, I didn't know where it was going to take me exactly, but it's like, I'm going to be doing stand-up comedy, writing funny stuff somewhere in there. And if it means I'm an accountant in the day or something, I'm doing something else. But it was always in my head as a little kid.
But you knew early on that you were funny.
Yeah, just because of the reactions of other people, even teachers. Like, I never went around, I'm the funny guy, but you just start to notice that, like, adults are kind of laughing too. And I always had that old man's mind even when I was a kid. And I think I had a sense of irony even when I was a little kid, and it would make adults laugh. So I thought, well, there's something different here.
Were you nervous back then when you were in front of people?
No, not it's funny. I was talking to somebody today about that, who it's my neighbor, who's he's really gregarious and great and like one-on-one, but he has to give a speech, and he was talking about how he's nervous, and I said, I know that's the natural thing. I always have been, the more people there, the better I kind of feel. I'm
Really?
a little more awkward in social situations of 2, 3 people I don't know or whatever. So as a kid, like if I was in front of a bunch of people, it was not a problem.
I think that's true for a lot of comedians, actually. Johnny Carson used to talk about he could be in front of a crowd and it wasn't a problem, but in a party, he was very shy and reserved. And
Yeah.
I think a lot of comedians are like that.
I would probably, because I'm thinking, well, the only time I see comedians out, we see each other, and so we're all being idiots together. But I'm glad to hear that actually.
What's the largest crowd you've ever performed to?
Uh, Not counting like television
No, no,
millions.
no. I mean live. Like it was in an arena or a huge theater.
Easton, I opened for her in New York State, and near Saratoga. It was 20,000.
Who was this? Sheena Easton?
Yeah, I did a few nights with her, and those were always crowds of about 20,000. And then Dennis Miller and I did some shows, and I remember there being about 15 at those. Those were like the biggest in-person kind of things. And I'm saying I like talking in front of people, but those were a bit nerve-wracking because that's a lot of freaking people.
So that's intimidating when you get in front of a huge crowd.
Well, it could be, I don't know, intimidating, but a little more butterflies than I would
Mhm.
normally get. And
Mhm.
especially, because I remember just thinking, like, first time I'd never been in front of a crowd that big and in front of Sheena Easton, and you walk out there, and the thought occurred to me that, boy, if they don't like you, 20,000 people could make a lot of noise. It's not like 6 people in a comedy
No,
club.
that's right. That's right.
Something, it's like, oh my God, they could rush the stage with torches. So I remember, there were some definite butterflies, but then what I did, and others had told me about it, was just like, I just looked at the first few rows of people and kind of pretended, hey, I'm talking to 500 people here, not
Mhm.
looking in that upper deck. And I first got out there, and I'm telling you, I remember the very first time I faced a crowd like that, my leg was shaking just a little bit. I could feel it. I was down there. I was like, uh-oh. But then I relaxed and relaxed, relaxed. And then, so it was going nicely. And then I made the mistake, and I got a little cocky, or whatever. And then I'm like, let's take a look. Let's not do that again. Because like when I looked up into the rafters and saw those people, I could feel it again. I was like, okay, don't do that. Don't do that again. And I just concentrated on those first few rows. So
I would think the scary part about that is if all those people went silent. That would be scary.
I don't. For some reason, in my weird imagination, I was more worried about like they attack me and ride me out with pitchforks or something. So, the silence not so bothered me. But they were nice. And that they're wanting to see the other act too. So that's the thing.
Well, they're not there to see you, right? They
Correct.
didn't
Correct.
there might be 1 or 2 or 4 people in the audience that you invited, maybe, but everyone else is there for Sheena Easton.
Right, and especially for musicians opening, because that's something you can walk into. Like when Dennis and I were doing shows, well, they were his audience, and his audience is kind of mine too. Not to put myself with him, but I love to work smart and pretty clean and stuff. So his audiences were mine, and so I would always go out and do really well there because and then Dennis would crush it, but I always felt pretty confident in front of his crowds because I thought people are coming to see him will like me too. And
So when you were coming up in the business, at what age were you when you first started doing the clubs? When did that start for you?
boy, let's see.
Were you still in your teens?
Close, like maybe about 20.
Uh-huh.
Can you believe it? 5 years that I've been doing this, Sam? It's just amazing.
It's only been 5 years. That's really
Yeah, I'm 25.
you're an amazingly experienced person for only 5 years.
Yeah. I mean, you told me the camera's not going to be on this is just audio, so they could think I'm 25.
Everybody, Ed is only 25
Thank you.
in his own mind.
I wish.
Are you still friends with people you came up through the business with?
Oh, absolutely. Lots of folks. And then, see, he passed away lately, Steve, as I talk about in my show. But, all these guys, my dear friend Louis Anderson, Norm Macdonald, Bob Saget, Richard Lewis, all these guys that I know and was friends with, it's scary. I mean, and they weren't that old. It's something, Newhart passed away. And I said, well, the guy was 95, so that wasn't as much of a blow, but it was really sad. But then seeing some of these other folk that are, my age or whatever.
So my question is, I assume that there were any number of folks from back in the beginning of your career who did not persevere, who did not succeed in some way, who didn't become famous or work in the business after a while. I assume there's some, and you have persevered all this time. And I guess my question to you is, what do you think of your perseverance, and how important is that to sustaining a career, to think in a perseverant way?
Boy, I mean, that's a good thing to point out. And I wish I could honestly say I was always but I just kind of put one foot in front of the other. I think, my career kind of went along pretty smoothly, especially like the first, I don't know, 10, 15 years or whatever. Just things kind of fell in place and you have little disappointments, but I just was kind of rolling with it to see what happens. And then, when some things happen and the strike and this and that, and I was like, oh, I remember saying to some friends, I'm like, well, this is kind of crappy. And then they canceled that show I was going to do. And they're like, Ed, I hate to tell you, but it's like now you're catching a little what everybody else was here. You've had a nice little run for and it's like, well, that's kind of true. And not like I was getting everything I wanted, but it was following a nice path. I had very few professional setbacks, it seemed like, for like a chunk of time there. So I was like, okay, you're right. I mean, you pay dues as a comic coming up, but you don't care. You're in your 20s, you're sleeping on
Right.
couches, you don't
Of
give a
course.
crap. To me, it's when you get out into Hollywood and you start doing the stuff in LA and really getting involved. And it went pretty nicely. So did I persevere? It's like, yeah, but I was blessed that, I didn't have to persevere too hard.
They kept coming to you. You didn't have to go seek it
Yeah,
out.
it was kind of like that, which is, and I wasn't arrogant about it, but I kind of got used to that.
I think one of the hardest things in Hollywood to do is to be in the writing business, especially the comedy writing business, sitcoms, and so on, because you're not likely to last for 40 years in that. It's going to probably be somewhere, if you're good at it, somewhere between 10 and 20 years, if you're lucky. You got a little bit longer than that, right?
Well, and then I do spin a lot of plates, you know what I mean? And that's what I told people, because look at, when we went on strike and I couldn't write, but I did stand up.
Right.
I just tried everything and most things worked for me. And so I was lucky in that way. Like I have some brilliant writer friends, as I'm sure you do, that like they can write sitcoms, but they can't write variety, or they can't
Absolutely
do
right.
this or do that. I kind of was pretty good at, I started out in variety and then I was like sitcom. I don't know. Can I do it? Oh, I can. And I spun a lot of plates, and as you know, the cycle would come through. Like sitcoms are big now, and all the variety writers are out of work, and then it shifts again, and it's varieties in, and sitcom workers are out of work. And I would because I was doing both, I stayed pretty steadily employed. And if a show went down, as they do, even a successful one, I'd be like, okay, well, I'm going to write a book. And so I wrote my first book, and I liked writing stuff and doing stuff. And I would tour as a comic, and I'd do that. So I kind of kept moving, and people are like, that's great, you're talented and driven. I'm like, well, who knows? That's probably fear at some level, to where you're just like, I'm going to do everything because you don't know what's going away.
Yeah, but you're self-motivated. Nobody is pushing you to write your book, correct?
Well, that's true.
It's not a work for hire. You're actually generating it on your own.
Well, that's true. So creative work I enjoy doing. And so, yeah, I always thought I was this lazy guy. And it's like, well, I can be, because like, if you want me to go out in the middle of the yard right now, probably don't want to do that. But with creative stuff, I've never had issues of writer friends, and you probably know a ton, but I've never been like that, as far as they'll be like, oh, I can't have solitaire on my computer because then I get this, and I don't get distracted. It's like they used to laugh at me because I would, they'd give us like 5 days to come back with a script when they'd send somebody out in a sitcom, go, you write this whole episode while we do this, then you bring this back and we'll work on it. And I would always jump right into it. And most guys would like put it off or whatever. But like, I guess I'm the other way. I didn't like that hanging over me.
I'm with you. I don't like it hanging over me. I like to get it done and out of the way. And I like the opportunity, if I feel like I need to keep revising it for some reason, I want that extra time.
Yes, sir. I'm right with you. But it's funny, right? You probably know, like, so many of my friends would always be like, oh, I get distracted. And I was like, this is like you. It's like, I don't. I got to get moving on it.
Do you think of yourself primarily as a writer before being a performer?
I don't really sit around and think about it, to be honest. You know what I mean?
Well, here's your chance.
No, I'd rather not. It depends on what I'm doing, right? When I'm performing, I'm a performer. When I'm writing, and then what am I writing too?
So you don't think of yourself as being one or the other. You think of yourself as being all of the above.
Comedic artist. Oh God, how pretentious does that sound?
That is really snooty,
So
Ed.
snooty. But damn it, that's who I am.
Would you prefer to write on your own? Do you prefer that over writing on a staff with a bunch of people?
I kind of like it all. So that's another one. I like being in the room with people, but I also at times like writing on my own. So lucky for me, like I said, I kind of enjoy all the different angles of that and not network notes and stuff like that. Hey, let me tell you, you will appreciate this. It reminds me of, because you're somebody who likes to jump right into the script. So I was writing a pilot, and it was an actor attached, a really good guy, but I won't talk about it because of the network and stuff. But at any rate, he brought me in. He's like, "Hey, this guy's going to write my pilot," and they're like, "Great." And then so he was like me and you, work like a man. So he and I sat down. We're like bangity bang, and we had this really good script in like 3 days, and we brought it in, and then they were like, okay, well, this, you obviously didn't put enough work into it. It was like that whole thing. We're like, well, why don't you read it? So then he read it, and he's like, no, it's really good, but I'll bet it can be even better. Take 5 days next time. So you know what we did? We pounded it out in 2 days, and waited 3 days, and then handed it in. He's like, see what that extra time does? Like, yeah, we went golfing those extra times, you idiot.
This is an important lesson for the listeners to pay attention to. If you work too quickly and turn it in too quickly, people assume you didn't spend enough time on it. They just assume it. And it doesn't matter what the quality is. I will tell you, David Mamet, the great writer David Mamet, famously would write something in a few days because he'd be on assignment for a studio, and he'd put it in a drawer for a few weeks, and then he'd turn it in.
I did not know that, but yeah, that's the kind of, and even my manager, and I get it, but I like to work fast. Like even if it was something that's kind of a one-off, or have to write up a monologue.
And in Hollywood, no matter what you turn in, they're going to give you notes to change things. So why kill yourself over it?
Yeah, and it's just like, well, I'm so sorry to get this done really quickly and really well,
Exactly.
But it's a strange phenomenon. Like they think it's just the time spent or what have you, and no, it's some people like to pound away at the stuff and do it.
Do you think that the way that you write or how you come at it, your process of writing, has changed since you first started in the business? Or is it pretty much the same way it's always been?
That was a great question.
Sometimes I get lucky.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting that. I got to go. I don't have any answers.
Thank you very much.
No, because I'm thinking now on it and stuff. I'm going, I think it's always been it's the stuff you and I are talking about. Like I was always somebody, I'm diving right into this. Like I get a call that afternoon. I'm like, I'm going to start thinking about this now, and sit down on a pad. And do I do more on my computer in the last 15 years or something?
Well,
probably, but I still do some longhand and jotting down stuff because I like to.
You've always had a certain level of confidence about what you're writing. That's my assumption, that when you're working on material, whether for yourself or for a show, for someone else, that you're not sitting there in kind of agony over whether it's great or not. You're just moving forward and have confidence in it.
I try not to worry about it. I don't know if it's confidence, but I just push ahead. Like I'm driving ahead. And then here's another one you may have discussed, I don't know, before on a show, but the whole idea of, some people want to go line by line and really, like, I will blast through. I'm going to write the whole scene. And I know that joke wasn't so great, but here we go. I'm going to complete the scene. Now I'll go back and do it. And some people would, prefer, no, let's get this line right. It's like, no, let's push through.
No, I'm a proponent of, a believer in, as many writer friends of mine are, of the notion of what they call purge drafts or vomit drafts. You just put it out, and then you worry about revising it after the fact, and you tweak and plus and so on. No, I believe you need to go through it as quickly as you can and get it out. I will tell you why, because you're actually making the clay that you have to then mold.
Right. Yeah. And you get some shockingly good stuff too. They're
That's
going like,
correct.
hey, that's good. And the rest has to, but that's why, I guess I've never understood the whole writer's block thing, because you just go, right? And it's like, well, and it may not be great, but you just go. And that's always how I've kind of worked. So not confidence per se, but like my mind is ready and it's like, what are you thinking of? And I just start putting it down. And I could be way off. I could be sort of close, as you know, but then it's, yeah, writing is rewriting.
All right, so you're spending the last 4 or 5 years writing Cracking Up, not knowing that it's going to be a book or an act. You don't know it's either one. You're just writing stuff down in the hopes of it turning into something. Yes?
I would say within about 6 months, as I started looking at all these stories, I was like, okay, what is this? And I thought, like, this is a show. It's a book. It's both. So I kind of knew, and it also was like made me feel good because it's like, hey, I'm doing this, so double duty here. This may not work as a story to tell on stage, but it works really well in print. And then some are like, I don't know if that goes in print, but boy, that's funny out loud. So it kind of felt like there was no wasted stuff, right?
Could you tell as you were writing it that these things would likely land?
It's like I was saying before, like you have a decent idea and you never know for sure. And I was right, you know.
And it'll be different from audience to audience too, I assume.
Well, there's always that danger too, but most of the stuff seems to go consistently. And yeah, there's some things I might have chickened out going like, oh, that was so quiet. I don't know if I even want to try that again. But there were other things that was like, I think that's good. I want to try it again. They just didn't like it. And then you find out one way or the other, you know. So, but you're right with the audiences being different.
If you made a decision or someone hired you, either way, to do an entirely new stand-up act, about how long do you think it would take to develop it?
God, that's a great question too, because it would really depend on the performer. You know, I mean,
Mhm.
how quickly they assimilate stuff, how you work well with them, because you know you're not writing in a vacuum per se. So working with the individual would be it's impossible to say.
How about for you?
Oh, for me to write what?
For yourself, if you were gonna write a new act for yourself, like when you first started out, how long did it take you to get, let's say, 15 minutes of material?
Gosh, I don't know the answer to that. It has been so long since I initially had my like first 15, and you're always tweaking and dropping and hopefully getting better. So I don't
Mhm,
have an
mhm.
answer on that for.
And when you're out on stage, are you then coming off stage and thinking to yourself, "I need to change that," or "I need to eliminate this," or add here? Are you always going through that process?
Yeah, at times it's kind of a pain in the butt. It's like, Ed, you're allowed to enjoy this, but I get on and I'll be like, oh, I forgot that one line and I did this because, right, it's what you're doing. And I try not to let it torment me, but it pops into my mind, or I'll be like, boy, that was kind of surprising. You can't help but kind of start doing an instant review. But that's I record the shows, and it's like we'll go through the agony of doing my least favorite thing, which is watching and listening to myself, but to see like, oh, did I flub that? Or oh, they did like that. That's weird.
Well, you're in really good company because that's what Steve Martin goes through when he's doing stand-up.
Yeah. All right. So there you go. I mean, that's how me and Steve roll.
Just the 2 of you, if you only could do that with him. Alright, so let's talk about Cracking Up. Why did you decide to finally just put it out now? Why now? Why not 3 years ago? Why not next year? Why now?
I think it really was, like I said, when the pandemic rolled around and I had to kind of stop. And like, when you're in Hollywood, you're just in it. It's project. It's a funny story, but I'm not writing it down. Like, oh, remember what happened? But I finally had some time to kind of sit, almost forced to reflect. And I just started thinking, and so you're sitting there. It was the first chance I really had to kind of start looking back over these decades there because I was always busy and always doing something. And then again, like I said, it's like, I'm going to start writing this down, so I don't start forgetting stuff and this and that. And I just kind of wanted this it's a little legacy thing, right? You get a little older, but going like, I want these stories to be out there. I want my kid to know, like, this is the stuff we went through. And it was really fun. And you don't think of it right at the time of going like, wow, that's amazing. We just did this or whatever. You just kind of moving. So
Of course.
chance to kind of look back and go, oh, that was sweet, and that was kind of bittersweet, and to kind of like review things.
Well, are you like me when you're writing material for yourself particularly, do you think of it as being dispensable, that it doesn't really have any value until you look back at some point and go, "Wow, that actually had value." Does that work for you that way?
Well, it depends on what it is, but and that's why I like this is more legacy. Like a friend of mine describes, like when you'd write for variety shows, he always described it as skywriting, and it's true.
What does that mean?
Skywriting meaning it goes up there,
It's gone.
somebody says it, and no one's thinking about it maybe ever again outside of in big, but a lot of times,
And it's topical, so it's right now.
right? And the ethos, and it's gone. So like those things like that, I don't worry about, but more of my own stuff too. It's like, I don't know. I feel like I kind of do want to just lay out, I'm not planning on any deaths soon, hopefully, but you just want to kind of start putting down and going, oh, this is what I did. And I want my kid to see that and remember. And it's fun. It just, the timing was right. But I honestly think it was the pandemic. So as if the pandemic didn't inflict enough pain on America to begin with, they got my book afterwards. But no, that was really the time where I started doing this. And I'm really glad I did it. I'm really enjoying this show. I had not done a show filled with just stories and not stand up. And it's really fun. And I have some visual things that I do. So it's been exciting to me. And I'm fortunate right now. I don't have to do stuff I don't want to do right now. I've been lucky. I'm very blessed with that. Once in a while I get an offer from Hollywood or if there's something, and it's like, it's really at this point got to be something I really want to do. And if it
Right.
isn't, I don't get, and it's nice to be in that position. Well, I took everything I could, which is why I had no time to even think about it till the pandemic. But now it's a little bit like I'm doing on the back nine of my life and career here. I want to do stuff that I really want to do, and I'm really enjoying putting that book out.
In the book, you talk about many different experiences that you had in Hollywood. It's not just one thing, it's many different things. Explain to the listeners what the difference is from your perspective of writing on a variety show versus writing on a sitcom. What are those big differences?
Well, for instance, like Dennis Miller Live, that show was live, and it's like, here we go. And I kind of liked that part because, right, unlike a movie or a sitcom, we don't have to keep going through, you got all this time, so just keep shooting. To a certain point, I'd be like, what's so great is that Friday at 8 o'clock, this is as good as we got, and here it is, people. So I liked that about, and a lot of variety shows go live or stuff like that. And as you know, movies can be torturous because we've got months, so let's just keep screwing around. And you're like, ay, ay, ay. And sitcoms, a little bit more of that too, mini movies, but a little more of that, more network notes, more delay because you have time to do stuff. The schedule,
But faster than a movie on a TV series.
a TV series is faster. I guess it depends on your director and everything else, right? You get somebody who likes to move, but a lot of the times, they want to just keep trying stuff on movie sets. TV moves faster than most movies, I think,
Mhm.
but you still have more time than, like I said, I like some of the pressure, and Oscars too. We close in, it's like, we're going live tonight, guys. Boo-hoo. Like, in 2 weeks, like, we're going to be done with this, and they can't come in and go, let's keep rewriting just because we want to feel like we're paying you guys for something.
Well, Lorne Michaels, who for most of 50 years has produced Saturday Night Live, he famously says, when the show starts at 11:30, it's not that we're ready, it's 11:30.
Right.
So you just go.
Right.
It's not like you're doing it live and you're improvising. There's a lot of material that's been churned out.
I don't think I've ever, quite honestly, that's, to me, it's frustrating. It's like, we could have gone 2 days ago. Like, usually, and especially in Dennis's show, we're like, we've got this packed show. Let's go. Let us out here. This is really good. I can't remember many shows of anything that I did that I was like, ooh, we're not ready for this, but we got to go. Like, it just wasn't like that when I worked on it.
Well, that's why you have a staff. It's not one person churning it all
Right.
out.
But this is people that pull at threads. And again, well, I talk about executives a lot in the book, and I'm not so afraid to trash them now and say, no, don't trash them by name, but just the notes and the dumb stuff, and them feeling like, well, you, like the guy saying to us, take 5 days instead of 3. It's like, no, do you like the script? It's really good. So you hate when you have to do stuff like that.
What's your philosophy on taking notes? When someone's giving you a note, if it's a great note, what do you do with it? If it's a really stupid note, what do you do with it?
Great notes, please hit me with as many as you can, because it's not my ego. It's like, I'm trying to get the best product together here, and that's what we're all supposedly doing. So helpful notes are great, but unfortunately, or at least in my experience, and I would guess most people's experience, that a lot of the notes aren't good, and sometimes they're really bad. And I've never understood why some executives, like, I don't know anything about cars. I can't fix a car at all. That's why I bring it to a professional. They fix it. I don't stand behind him as he's doing it, going, do this or that. I let him do his thing. If there's a problem or it's like, hey, it's still clunking, you go back to the pro. But these people come in and they all think they're creative or whatever. And, it's no sin to not be creative. But these people come in and they just start pulling it out. Try this, try that. And then you're trying to explain to them, too, that especially in a hour-long show, nothing happens in a vacuum. You're pulling at all these threads in the first act. This story's going to fall apart. And then when
That's
you see
right.
it in the thing, we're trying to, oh, I just did the slap there. Did you hear it was on my own knee? The last time I was on Steve's show, I was pounding the table for emphasis and stuff. And he's like, Ed, I've had to pull all those out. So I have no table here, but I just slapped my knee. But you're a knee slapper there, Steve.
I'm slapping my knee here. I'm just doing it quietly.
But no, so they would, but then who gets the blame? They like pull at all these threads, and we're trying to tell them this, and then the story collapsed, and they're genuinely perplexed, going, "Wow, why doesn't this work?" And it's pretty frustrating. They're signing the checks, and you're like, because you wouldn't let us do our work.
That is the example that you're saying, which is repeated every day in Hollywood over and over and over again, of people justifying the pay that they're getting for their jobs. And so they have to give you something, or otherwise, why have them? So they give you notes, and then it's on you to figure out whether the notes have any value or not.
Yeah, and you can usually tell. And it's funny because my first experience was with Carolyn Strauss from HBO. It was on Dennis's show. She was fantastic. Like, plenty of times she'd be like, "Nope, you guys are good to go," or "Oh," and whenever she had a suggestion, it was like really helpful. So in my head, I'm thinking like, "Oh, this is what executives are like. This is great." And I thought, "Geez, why are so many of my compadres? They're always bitching about notes." Then I get onto a sitcom and I'm like, "Oh my God, this is what they're talking about," and they're just ruining the show. So my first experience,
You got spoiled.
it was misleading because I thought like, "Oh, this is really good." And she was one of the handful of executives I worked with who was like really helpful.
And all right, so let's go back to your stand-up act now, your act. Nobody's giving you notes on that except the audience, right?
No, a great point. Another thing I'm really enjoying, right, is like, I'm going to live or die on my own instincts. Yeah. And that's something I always did like about stand up. It's like nobody, I'll take suggestions from other friends and everything else, but nobody's coming up going, you should do this or that. And same with the one man show, too. It's like somebody like you or somebody I know who knows this stuff. I would love, I'd love their feedback, but you don't have some guy who's basically an idiot and, in his first suit coming out and saying like, "Oh, hey, do this or that." And it's like, oh,
Did you have an editor on the book?
This one I did not. So yes, I should make one up to blame. But this was like my fifth one. I had a great editor named Helga Shire in the very first one I did, because that's the first book I'd ever written. And oh my gosh, she was just so awesome. So she did the first couple of my books, and then I was doing ghostwriting for some people's books and editing other people's books. So I got really experienced in it. And this one here is like, it was all such a personal project, and I'm writing these stories and putting them on stage and just putting them in the book. And, then I'm horrified too. Like, oh my God, there's, some people proofread and they missed, there's a couple little typos, which drive me nuts, but I blame myself. I was like, oh my God, how did I not, it's the forest through the trees kind of thing.
Well, that is once I go through that all the time where you're writing and writing and writing and writing, and it's the same thing. You're revising and revising. And the next thing you know, you hand it in to someone. And the next day you look at the first page and there's a mistake on page one.
Right.
And you go, how's that possible?
Right.
That's really common. I think that's so common. I'm curious, you've obviously written for a number of really famous people. Do you have to do something in your own mind's eye to get into their voice?
Yeah, it seems it's nothing I sit there and go like, okay, now I will channel Morgan Freeman, or it's just meeting them and kind of getting their rhythm. And that was something that I discovered too. It's like, oh, can I write in other voices? And first it was other stand-ups, and then I just was kind of able to do that. I get a sense of their rhythm, and it just seems to kind of naturally flow. And then the more you work with them and stuff too, and it's like, oh, I see how they think here. And so it's like not a conscious thing where I like do it, but it just sort of happens.
Do you find that you have to write a little bit of material to kind of get into that rhythm? Do you have to work your way into it?
Yeah, and some people are more distinctive than others as far
Well,
as,
sure.
right. Like Marcia Gay Harden, who's a wonderful actress, and I wrote some stuff for her. But it's like, well, she reads people's lines, and like, there's not a character there in my head of going, this is what.
Oh, she's an actress.
Right.
She's not a personality.
Right. And that can be trickier because I sit and go, hey, you comfortable with this? Or I don't get to know them. Whereas opposed to, somebody like Dennis, too, really easy to fall into his, we all walked around talking like Dennis. That was a bad thing. We're all like talking and hey, chat. And I'm like, this is really bad. We all snarky. And I remember, and boy, I remember then the first time, and we would savage each other. Oh my God, we were the meanest staff to each other, but it was hilarious. But this when Dennis is like, everybody just crapped all over everybody. And then you'd have to remember to not take that home with you. Because I remember now I'm with my fiance. I get home walking there. So I was working. I'm like, bat, 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 bat. And I'm like, what the hell? And I'm like, oh, geez. I work here. You know? I realized some savage line is like, oh, that just came up because I've been defending myself all day against all these other guys. And
Were you doing that to Dennis?
oh yeah, he loved it. You know, we all just crap all over each other all the time. Yeah, yeah. Oh my God.
So you were actually doing Dennis Miller to Dennis Miller.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. We'd always do that to him.
That's hilarious. So you have also written for non-performers like athletes. Is there a difference in doing something like that where you know they're not trained?
No, that can get challenging or depending. And right. And some people are more naturally skilled to stuff, especially all the SPs I did where you get different athletes. And some people,
Who was the hardest? Who was the most difficult to write for?
boy. And by difficult, I guess you mean just trying to get there.
Get them to actually be able to say the words so that they had some kind of
Well, I'm trying
rhythm
to
to it.
remember now because you know some of the guys, hey, they're athletes. They're not. I remember my dad used to get mad when an athlete wouldn't be articulate in his thing. I was like, Dad, that's not what he does. You know.
Exactly. No, I'm curious. I don't mean to be
Yeah,
smart
no,
anybody.
I'm trying to think of it because you know some people are shy than others, and you just give them you wouldn't challenge them too hard with stuff. And then some people surprise you. Like I wrote this guy with Joe Theismann. I had no idea if he could, but I had him. The whole premise was that he was desperately following Samuel L. Jackson around, wanting to be part of the show, and he was blowing him off. And I didn't even know Theismann. I write this thing, but I know Samuel L. And I'm like, oh, this is pretty funny. Then I realized it's like, wow, I have painted Theismann as this like pain in the ass guy who wants to do stuff and no one wants him to. So I mean, the first time we get on the phone, and he's like, wow, Ed, I don't know. What do you think of me? And, you know, and I was like, oh, Lord. I said, well, Joe, you know, I just figured you have a great sense of humor. And he was outstanding. He was so good like that. He was hilarious. Like as the guy, he's in there washing the mirrors in the bathroom. And like everywhere Samuel went, he was like in his face. And he was, and I had said like, oh, you know, yeah, we really did make him look like this egomaniac to where he put on his full uniform and he's standing there in a hallway, like selling his DVDs of his Super Bowl highlights. And I was like, you know, you write that down and thinking like, oh, that could be kind of insulting. But I'll tell you, he took it and ran with it and he was hysterical.
Did you have to tell anybody famous that what they were doing wasn't working? And you don't have to name any names.
Well, yeah, you know, that comes up and you know, yeah, and you have to be as kind of, as I say,
How brave do you have to be? You have to be pretty brave, I would think.
I don't know, beyond a certain point. I'm like, well, what are they going to do to me? You know, it's like directors really have to go through that. But like, oh, you know, let's simplify this, or let's maybe try this. And, you know, nobody was like too much trouble. But yeah, you get worried because you go like, oh, this could have been really good. But this poor guy, it's not what he does. And he sucks at it. So it's like, you know, once in a while you get somebody too that really was like, I don't want to be funny. I'm like, no problem. I got you covered there. Yeah, but I appreciated people like that weren't, you know. I remember one time they had me write some really straight copy for Joe Montana, who I love.
Not Joe Montana, Joe Montana.
Montana. How does he say it? Montana.
Montana.
Oh,
Yeah.
you're right. Not the football player, Joe Montana. The guy from Searching for Bobby Fischer and all the
Criminal
others.
Minds.
But they were saying, I love him. And it's funny, but they said, oh, don't give him anything funny. He doesn't want to do anything funny and this and that. And then, so I wrote that. And then he's watching these other people get jokes. He's like, to me, he's like, hey, can I get some funny stuff? I'm like, yes, you can. I can't tell you. I think I wrote about it in the book. I don't remember because I haven't read it in a while. But the fact that all of a sudden these publicists started getting in the way of, you know, you'd work directly with people on these variety shows and you hear from the publicist, she doesn't like this, he doesn't like that. I'm like, really? And then I'd sit there and think like, I don't know, those are pretty funny. And then you'd run into the star themselves. And I would always have the stuff. And I'm like, oh, hey, how about something? Like, oh, that's great. I love that. And you realize the publicist didn't show it to them. They all of a sudden, a lot of them wanted to be these gatekeepers. Like
gatekeepers.
Like, yeah, get the hell out of here.
What do you do as a producer with a gatekeeper like that? How do you handle that?
You go right past him. That's what I was doing. Find the producer. I was just like, oh, okay. It's like, he doesn't like it. And I'm like, well, okay, I'll get him something. I'll meet with him on the stage. You know, and then 90% of the time they had never even seen it, you know. And then some people are jerks, and we won't name them, like they would come in and be like, you send it like 10 times, and they were saying they signed off on it, and they come in like, what? I'm not saying that. And you're like, okay, well, But that was the minority, I gotta say.
What was and again, no names, but what was your philosophy on handling jerks or difficult people?
Yeah, what do it's like, well, what are you looking for? And it's like, okay, well, how about this? You just,
So what you're saying is you had to go with the flow to a certain extent.
oh yeah, like unlike my own stand, whatever, not my decision. It's like what do you want to say? And I always think too, it's like I could make you look better, but okay, if you want to, this is what you want to do, or what do you? It's like okay, you do that, and then it's really fun though to see people that like I think I wrote in the book about it. It was Jeffrey Tambor and Noah Wiley who had never met each other, but they were giving out these things. And it's like they're pretty good actors, so I wrote. You know how they always have the stilted conversations of those award show like I really enjoy your work, you as well. So I in my mind I was like this would be funny, they've never met but they should act like oh I'm a big fan. And then finally they're kind of like you've never seen my show. It's like no I'm not, no, who are you? I don't even know who you are, let's just get this over with. And I thought like funny idea, we'll see. Oh my god, did they nail it? And that's when you feel so good. It's like you guys, it was funny on paper but boy did you hit that out of the park, and you're really appreciative of that, you know.
Being around as many excellent performers, actors, comedians as you have, because you've been around quite a few, can you put your finger on, do you have any sense of what makes them special? What makes them, and it doesn't have to be any particular individual, but in general, what makes someone who becomes a star a star? Do you have a sense of it at all?
You know, I think it is that it factor, that vague thing. But
Hmm.
talking about Samuel L. Jackson, so this is funny. So in that sketch that I had written, I put myself in as the producer. So I have one little scene with him, you know, and I'm kind of nervous. I'm not an actor, and I'm studying my lesson. Like, oh, I got to make sure I have this. And then we're getting to the point where we got to shoot that. And then Samuel was like, oh, hey, do you have, yeah, Ed, I'm sorry. Do you have the script? I just need, he looks at it for like 30 seconds. He's like, oh, okay, good. And he, you know, he just nails it. And I was like, wow, that like as an actor, he hadn't studied. I was studying. I was so glad that I didn't screw it up. We did it in one take. But in my head, I was like, oh my God, if I'd started messing up. But I remember looking at that and going like, wow, that's just somebody who's got something, man. Like,
Do you think he has a photographic memory?
I think it's some of that. I don't know. And some of it is just, I don't know, right? It's that it factor where like he's just naturally him and it was great. And he, so relaxed. And, you know, obviously a pro who's an award winner.
Absolutely.
But I remember looking at that and going like, see, there's something different about this guy than most people that can do something like that.
Well, I think that that's what I was trying to get at. I think it's almost impossible. It's an intangible, but there is something that separates people who become stars. I don't mean necessarily celebrities, but stars, actual stars. They have something that others
Yeah, like
just don't.
Sean Penn, or like, how in the hell is he so good? I don't know. Like everybody studies and there's good actors, but some of these people, man, and they have no fear of the cameras or whatever it is, but they just deliver. And you know, you'd see it on sitcom sets a lot too. Sometimes we get guest actors, and they'd be pretty good in rehearsal, but they get out in front of the crowd and stuff, and it's you know, you see they're just not as good. They're nervous. Some people are just naturals.
Tell the listeners the story about working on the highest rated show and the lowest rated show in the same week.
Pretty cool, right? Like once I
Yeah.
put that together, it's like I bet nobody's ever done that. I would bet. I'm pretty willing to bet nobody's ever done that besides me, and nobody ever will. But yeah, it was the first Oscars that I did with Billy. In the daytime, I was working on Nick Freno,
Billy Crystal, we're
and
talking about.
yeah, it would. So I was working on Nick Freno, and then I just written some stuff for Billy for comic relief, and he got his like eighth time of hosting the Oscars, and he asked me to write it with him, you know, and I was like, oh, this is great. But all day, I would work on Nick Freno, this little sitcom, and you know, it was okay. It was just a little sitcom, and at night I would go and work with Billy, and so I was kind of moonlighting and doing this, and yeah, just funny that first when it came out. And Billy sent me I show it on my show. He sent me the LA Times would always put the ratings up, and he sent me a plaque because it had Oscars #1 and Nick Freno dead last. And you know, and that's another one that like, oh, that's cool. It's a nice gift, but until I had some time to kind of sit back and go, you know, that's pretty freaking amazing. And I seriously, do you think anyone's ever done that? Like, you don't have the opportunity to do.
And how many people have had a plaque sent to them, custom made by Billy Crystal?
Well, and I sent him one first. See, that was the thing. That's another thing I talk about in my act, but that he and I always reenact Oswald and Jack Ruby. So it's a long story I won't get into. But anytime I see him and stuff too, he tries to surprise me. He comes up as Ruby and I strike the pose. And we do it in front of people and they're confused.
Because you unfortunately look a little bit like.
Well, this is, I don't know. I'm telling you, one time, yeah, I walked in his office for some reason. Yeah, he goes, "Hey, Eddie, you look like Oswald." And then I just said, "Well, I am him." And I struck the iconic pose, which they can't see, but you're thinking you're grabbing your stomach because you've been shot by Jack Ruby. And we laughed. And for some reason, that became our thing. And we do it in front of you. And one of the best ones was, we do it to this day, but right before the Oscars, he was supposed to go out in his curtain. I'm standing back there. And there's a couple security guards and me and Billy. He's just about to walk through the curtain. He whips around trying to catch me off guard with the gun. And I'm right there. I do the Oswald and he goes out on stage. And the two security guards are standing there and they go, "Is that Oswald and Ruby?" And I go, "Yeah." Like, why wouldn't it be? And well, the plaque I gave him was that famous photo, but with my face and his face photoshopped in. And on the back, I wrote, "Billy, you slay me." And then, so that's when he sent me the other thing. And that's still up in his office. I have friends that will go and they're like, "Hey, I had a meeting with Crystal. I saw you up on the wall getting shot." I said, "Well, that's my legacy."
That's in an office somewhere, not his home, I assume.
Yeah, in Beverly Hills, yeah.
Yeah, because unfortunately he lost his home in the big fire.
Yeah, terrible. I mean,
that is horrible. Just horrible.
And then when people, always feel, "Oh, they're rich and this and that." It's like, look, he's grateful. He knows he has money to be this and that, but he's a really good guy, a sentimental guy, and they lived in that house for 46 years. So all his memories were in there. So it was really
it's horrible.
Yeah, it was a terrible thing. Too many friends.
Truly devastating to him, and who knows how many other thousands of people.
Yeah,
truly.
I'm sure, like you probably, I know about 8 or 9 people.
I know several people that went through it. It's there's nothing you can say. It's just awful.
No.
I am curious, one question here about, you've obviously pitched lots of jokes. You've pitched lots of stories, and pitching a joke, I assume, is a little different than pitching a story. What are your thoughts on how one successfully pitches something? Is there a way to do it?
That's really interesting. Different people like to work in different ways, right? Like, for instance, a lot of times with Billy that we'd come in and you'd have jokes and you'd read them out loud to him. Is like how he liked to do it. Dennis used to like to read the jokes himself on paper and then might come and talk to you about it. And then there's times where stuff just pops out too of your mouth and like, "Oh, I like that," because you think of something and it's not on the page. So everybody likes to work a little differently. The nicest, because I'm looking, I just realized that the Barry Manilow thing is there. But I told him that's the nicest guy who ever at turning down like jokes. I told him, because he would sit there, and he'd look and go like, "Oh, it's really funny, but I don't think I can do that." And I was like,
so just so the listeners know, there's a framed image of Barry Manilow behind Ed with a bunch of, I guess, CDs or DVDs on it, and it has to be to commemorate large sales, I assume.
Yeah, it was. I helped. I'm looking up at it now. The Manilow Music and Passion, live from Las Vegas, when he first opened his show there. I helped him with.
Did you write his act?
I helped him with the jokes, for the first couple of weeks there, and they were nice enough to send this to me. I had nothing to do with how many you sold their guys, but I appreciate it. But he was about the sweetest as far as, going like, "Oh, it's real funny, but I don't think I can say it." It's like, God bless you. And then, well, Dennis, but we all were savage to each other anyway. Sometimes Dennis would just be like, "How dare you run that dog crap past me?" He'd say that, like being funny, but it was like, so people take different.
Did anybody take umbrage at that, or did everybody just get it?
Well, on Dennis's show, we got it because that's how we treated each other. It's terrible, but you'd never want to do that in the outside world. But everybody was just. I still laugh. And then it's just the one time somebody made a joke and it didn't make much sense, and it's just hanging there. And Dennis just goes, "Phew." I still love that one. I'll do that for friends of mine. I think they'll tell me something. Phew. I'm trying to think. Yeah, most people pretty nice. Or like, "Oh, I don't know if that's for me." Or
but in comedy, you have to throw stuff that doesn't work out to try to find good stuff sometimes.
Oh, absolutely. Right. And it's like, and I never, especially to another client, submit something that I don't think is at least half funny. It's like, I don't want to be embarrassed. Or you'll sometimes go like, "I don't got it, but is there something in and you'll talk about an area. But I never liked to hand in. I would always, look over and pull stuff out. I didn't want to ever give something to like, oh, I'd be embarrassed to have this. And then some guys, it was funny too, they're like, well, here's one guy was famous for, it's just so funny. It'd always be like 10 versions of the same joke. And I get it, but and finally I'm like, hey, dude, I don't need you to show your work. Can you just pick the best, of one or two? Like sometimes you can't know which way to do a joke, but like it would drive me nuts. It's like, I'm seeing how you do this. I don't care. Like just bring 2 jokes. I don't want to hear you do 10 versions of the same joke.
Here's what I think is the lesson I'm taking away from a lot of what you've been talking about in this show is that the work that you do in show business frequently is actually not very precious. And you shouldn't think of it as precious, that you have to be so delicate with it. It's just stuff, and it comes and it goes, and it's past. And once it's past, it's done. But in the meantime, you don't have to kill yourself over it. You put out the best that you can, and you hopefully other people agree with you that it works.
Well, that's what I'd like to say. That's always my thought. But, there's times where you had a joke that you thought was really good and they kicked it and didn't use it, and it would bug me. I wish it wouldn't, but afterwards I'd be like, and one of the great Dennis moments too, I think I wrote about it in my first book, was on, I don't know, we were kicking around and I put some joke out there and Dennis was like, eh. And then I don't know, I think I was just being goofy or whatever. It wasn't the strongest joke in the world, but I was like, I actually said before I realized it, I said, I don't know, it's pretty smart. And I think, if said in the proper way. So that was a gauntlet, and he's like, okay, put it in if you believe in it, Driss. And I remember thinking, I was like, it's okay. It's not the greatest joke, but it's okay. So we go out that night, it was a live TV show, and I have the film somewhere. But so he goes out and he does the joke, and it is silence. I've never had a joke do that. I don't know. Like in retrospect, looking at it, going, okay, it wasn't the greatest, but holy crap! I mean, he literally took a step forward, and the crowd didn't leave. And I'm standing up there, and I'm like, oh, on the floor. And he just goes, but okay, where's freaking Eddie Driscoll? Where are you? Oh my God. And it was funny. And then last he goes, yeah, you're like, do it. It's smart. Meanwhile, I lost a couple of heat tiles there. You're up there having a Snapple laughing at me. And they all laughed. And I was like, oh, and I kind of felt bad. And then afterwards, I was like, geez, sorry. And he's like, no, it was fine. Because he made it into a funny moment. But it was so funny. Like, I don't know if I've ever had something miss that badly in the one time that I'm pushing him into doing it. And it was like, oh my God.
The great talk show hosts, and I think mainly about Carson, lived on the stuff that bombed. And that's where they really made their money, is making things happen on the bomb.
Letterman was a little famous for that as well. Yeah.
Also famous for it too.
I don't like right bombs, but it worked out. But that was the strangest thing. And I got quite a kick out of it because I still have not everybody calls you out on national TV right then. But I'm standing there and it was like, it's so funny. I just about fainted. I was like, it was pin drop city. I've never heard anything that silent before or since.
Well, I have been having the most fun I've had in quite some time doing this show for an hour now with Ed Driscoll. And we're going to wind the show down a little bit. Ed, in all of these amazing stories that you have in the book and in your career, are you able to share one with us that's either beyond what you've already told us, that's either weird, quirky, offbeat, strange, or just plain funny?
Well, how much more time we got? No, but when we were talking about ESPYs, it made me think of one of the more bizarre encounters I had, which is with Dick Vitale.
Yes.
Dick Vitale, the college, but he's awesome, baby. He's a PTP. He's unbelievable. Known for being ebullient, right? So it was 95, and it was just when O.J. Simpson had just been acquitted in the criminal trial, the big trial. He had been found not guilty. And I remember because when I went down to the studio that day, I was working on something, maybe ESPYs or something for ESPN, and I run into Dick Vitale in the hallway. And I just go, oh, hey, Dick, how's it going? He goes, oh, it's terrible, baby. He killed those people. It's unbelievable. And I'm like, oh, my God, this is like a bad Saturday Night Live sketch, right? It's like, how would Dick Vitale react to the news of the OJ verdict? Like, oh, it's horrible, baby. And I was like, oh, my God, he's like this all the time. Like, it must be exhausting. He's doing this. I'm going, no one would believe this. He's doing Dick Vitale reacting to that. So that was one of the weirder. I just didn't even know what to do
Oh,
with
I
that.
love that story. That's just what you imagine being married to him, getting that all
Oh
day
my
long.
God, yeah, no, it's just what he's like. And I was like, God bless him. I don't have that energy, but holy crap.
All right, Ed, last question for you today. You've given us tons of advice throughout this whole show, but I'm wondering if you have a single solid piece of advice or a tip that you like to give to those who come up to you and say, Ed, how do I make it in this business? Is there something that you tell people?
Yeah, it's funny. I've been thinking about this lately, and it still applies to me, and I have to remind myself. But just the whole run your own race, follow your own path. Don't worry about what other people are doing, and especially now, these kids they're doing that, and don't get worried about what's this guy doing or what are these people doing. It's like keep your vision in your heart, what you want to do. And I have to remind myself of that too. It's like, I want to start doing this one man show. That's what I'm going to write. Oh, but maybe you should do a sitcom. Like, oh, that friend of mine's doing that. And you can really start getting pulled or thinking you're supposed to be doing something else. So I guess I would remind people, and I have to remind myself, it's like follow your vision, your path of what you want to do, and don't be worried about what others are doing. You can honor what they're doing and enjoy it, but don't try to be what you think somebody else wants you to be. And I think it took me a while to get that and finally like, okay, I'm just going to follow my path here and do what I think I should be doing.
Well, I think that's absolutely phenomenal advice because I think a lot of people, when they're starting out, myself included, you're trying to please others as opposed to pleasing yourself.
Absolutely. Right. And that's natural. Right. But as I've gone along, and then again, like I said, it's funny, even with all this experience, once in a while, you just sit there and going, wait, should I be doing that? Yeah, my friend just told me he's doing this movie with that. Maybe, and I was like, no, let him do his thing. That doesn't. You're doing what's right for you. And so, yeah, it takes a while to learn that. But anytime I do that, I'm a lot happier too. Right, just following my own path. And
100% much more healthy way to think about doing this thing called show business. Ed Driscoll, this has been a phenomenal, wonderful, energy-filled hour on StoryBeat, and I can't thank you enough for your time and your wisdom. It's just fantastic.
Thank you so much, man. I always love chatting with you, and it's nice to do it in front of a bunch of people too. So that's a nice thing. Thank you for having me. I really do appreciate it.
And so we've come to the end of today's StoryBeat. If you like this episode, won't you please take a moment to give us a comment, rating, or review on whatever app or platform you're listening to. Your support helps us bring more great StoryBeat episodes to you. StoryBeat is available on all major podcast apps and platforms, including Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, and many others. Until next time, I'm Steve Cuden, and may all your stories be unforgettable.